A 15-year-old girl named Anne Frank died 70 years ago this week in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. The exact day is unknown. I heard this past week on National Public Radio. Her diary was published as Anne Frank's Diary of a Young Girl in 1947. It has become one of the most famous books in history, translated into more than 60 languages. Anne Frank was a 15-year-old girl who was among the millions who died in the Holocaust. One of the most horrendous examples of human beings denying the reality that all people belong in God's creation. Fred Craddock, whom you've probably never heard of, was a highly esteemed preacher and preaching professor of the last century, and he tells this story of his first church in Tennessee, a small town where an atomic energy plant was built and people flocked to it for work. They overwhelmed the available housing in town, so they built lean-tos, lived in tents, slept in cars, and there were dirty little kids running amok and all the other inconveniences that come with a makeshift settlement. Craddock called a church board meeting and said that these folks have come from everywhere and now they're in our little town and the church needed to reach out to them. But the chairman of the board said, no, it's just a temporary settlement, trailers and tents. Fred said they may be temporary, but all the more reason for them to have a place to belong. And they need the gospel. In the end, a resolution was offered by a relative of the chairman of the board, and that resolution allowed members to be brought into the church only if they owned property in their county. Fred Craddock was the only dissenting vote, and as you might guess, he wasn't long for that congregation. St. Patrick, on his mission to the pagans in Ireland many centuries ago, created the Celtic cross. It is a circle representing the sun. It was the symbol of the Druids. And it meant that the sun was the source of all life and nourishment. And St. Patrick took that circle and he placed it at the juncture of the Roman cross, suggesting that the two religions share the same deep assumptions. This is the cross, by the way, that is on our baptismal font. I would lift it up for you to see, but I don't have the strength. St. Patrick did not demand that the Irish believe every dot and tittle of Roman theology before they joined the Christian community, though he refused to tolerate human sacrifice. He brought some of the pagan ideas into the Christian rituals. His way of reaching out, his mode of evangelism was very different than those that had happened earlier, which often had to do with swords being held at the throats of peoples who had been defeated in war and being told to believe in Jesus as your Savior or die. I think I know what choice I'd make there. The modern equivalent of that is believe in Jesus or suffer in hell for eternity. These two strategies involve holding belief as the most important thing about the Christian faith, while the second most important thing was behavior, because they believed that behavior moved from belief. But St. Patrick thought differently. He said belonging is number one. And so the text that was read for today, when Jesus walks by the boys in the boats fixing nets, Peter, James, and John, and says, "Follow me." It's a model of evangelism. So today, I'm not preaching on a particular text, but on broader ideas that are connected to evangelism. And since it's St. Patrick's Day, I'm just going to put them right down your throat. Belonging comes first. That's what he said. And this is a basic assumption about that Jesus carries. People belong. People have a place. This is not a passive stance. It is not tolerance. This is not anybody can do whatever they want as long as they don't hurt anybody else. No, that idea is a corollary of individualism, which keeps people kind of separated from one another and not belonging to one another. We're talking about honest to goodness belonging. Being a community where others know that someone has their back. This is why we do this prayer thing every Sunday, right? Sometimes it gets stretched out and it's a little longer than we'd like it to be, and the watch kind of ticks by, but doggone it, we need to know. We need to know who's suffering with what, who's celebrating this or that. We need to know because we make a commitment to have one another's back. So as long as it goes on, it goes on. And some days it's shorter and other days it's longer. And we want to get out early and, there's a basketball game going on, but tough luck. This is important. We want to belong to one another. Belonging's a process, of course. Some folks come to have their kids baptized and return to have the same kids confirmed. It's kind of a transactional thing, like belonging to Costco. I'll give you this and I'll get that. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. We love that. But the truth is we're introducing people to a different kind of belonging. In seminary terms, we call it covenantal belonging, not contractual. And covenantal belonging isn't a tit-for-tat kind of thing. I give you this, you give me that. It's more like marriage, It's like I give you 150% and you give me 150%. Even through all of the struggles that happen in all marriages, Stumbles and mistakes. And yet, there's somebody that has your back. That's what belonging means in the Christian community. In theological terms, love God, love neighbor. And of course, what we hope, not only for others but for ourselves, is that this idea of belonging and this understanding that it's important for all human beings becomes a part of our lives. And so, what we hope, of course, is that there are people who want to help sustain the community and they give money to it. They join boards and committees, fix furnaces, fix plumbing that breaks under the deacon's closet sink, floods the basement. Even in those difficult times, we hope that this kind of belonging would enable us to want to sustain a community that celebrates belonging. It's more than being nice or tolerating others. So what about belief? If belonging's first, what the heck do we believe? Well, we're committed to the biblical story. There's no question about that. From Genesis to Revelation, we are committed to this story. In this story, we find the shape of our own lives defined and given direction. When we look at the creation story, we're not looking to see whether it is scientific or not. No, we're looking for the wisdom of what it means to be a human being. We can question whether or not the world was created in 7 days, but that's not the point. The point is, what does it mean to be created in God's image? The point is, what kind of a conversation can we have with one another around these stories that enables us to be deeper human beings on the pathway to God's call in life? We don't follow Jesus because he was magic, walked on water. We follow Jesus because he showed that living for others is more meaningful than simply living for yourself. This wellspring of wisdom has nourished people for centuries and continues to nourish us today. We don't agree with everything that we believe, but we're also aware that none of us individually has the whole truth put up into one little ball, you know. Truth is an ongoing conversation that we are a part of here in the Christian community. So you got belonging, you got belief, and then you have behavior. Well, behavior is a matter of embodying this belonging. You know, it's a matter of something not simply being in your head, in the intellect, but it's something that moves through your heart and into your life. It's something that you take on with you even when you leave the church and you go into the church building, that is, and go into your regular life. You feel this sense that your life can have an effect on other people's lives so that they know they belong as well. The evangelism of St. Patrick, and I believe of Jesus, began with belonging and moved toward belief and behavior. Remember Fred Craddock? Well, years later, he and his wife were on vacation, and they drove by his first church, but it was no longer a church. It was a barbecue restaurant. So they stopped in and they looked around. And the pews were all pushed up against the walls, and there was music playing, and people, a very rough-looking sort of people, were dancing and eating and having a great time. And Fred said, it's a good thing this isn't a church anymore, because if it was, these people wouldn't be allowed in here. Anne Frank's diary tells the story of her family and friends who hid for 2 years in an attic above her father's old shop in Amsterdam because they were Jews in a time when Nazism was rolling over Europe. They had to live in darkness and quiet so they wouldn't give their hiding place away. They got by, often barely, on smuggled cans of food, and each day Anne lay below the attic skylight to stare up at the bare limbs of a chestnut tree, she writes, on whose branches little raindrops shine, appearing like silver. While this lasts, she says, I cannot be unhappy. Just a few weeks before Anne Frank and much of her family were dragged off to the camps and died, she wrote about her faith in people, of all things. And I quote, in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. I can't build up my hopes on a foundation of confusion, misery, and death. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think that this cruelty too will end, and that peace will return again. And in the meantime, I must uphold my ideals for perhaps the time will come when I shall be able to carry them out. Yours, Anne. In the face of the horror of the Holocaust, a chestnut tree on whose little branches raindrops shine was evidence enough that she belonged in the world. St. Patrick put a circle on the cross to show that everyone in the land of Ireland belonged. What will it take for people to know that they belong? Maybe for someone, your life can be a raindrop that shines. Maybe for someone, your life can be a Celtic cross. And maybe for someone, South Church can be a barbecue.